Electric cars are a very niche category in India. There are very few offerings and the prices tend to range well above 20 lakhs. But now things are set to change with the launch of this, the all-electric Tata Nexon.
I will be the last to fall.
That is expected to have prices ranging between 15 to 17 lakh rupees at the time of its launch, which is not too far away. Now the Nexon Electric is built on the same platform that is used by its traditional ICE powered counterparts. But of course, this car no longer has an engine bay. Probably you can call it a motor bay now, because the electric motor is in there and it has a single speed transmission and a lithium-ion battery pack, a 30.2 kilowatt-hour rated battery pack that is spread across the floor of this car, and it has an IP67 dust and moisture proof rating. Now in terms of styling, this is the facelifted Tata Nexon. I think it looks great. It has a very chunky front end. I like the front air dam over there, the styling, the color inserts, the new grille, and of course the Range Rover Evoque-like headlights. Nothing wrong with that. Tata does own JLR after all. Now front end styling changes aside, you get new alloy wheels on this car. Like the earlier Nexon, you get a dual tone paint job with a different colored roof. And of course, you get your EV badges all around the car. But a special mention goes to this new teal blue shade that is exclusive to Tata's Ziptron range of electric cars, which currently includes the Nexon Electric. Now when it comes to the inside of the Nexon Electric, this is a very familiar place because you have an identical layout. The dashboard is the same, the seats are the same. So in fact, the layout of the dashboard is identical to the standard production model with the diesel and petrols, that is. But the gear lever is now gone. This gear knob controls the single speed transmission. You get forward, you get reverse. And in fact, you get sport mode when you dial it up ahead of drive mode. Now this rotary gear lever has 4 settings: neutral, drive, sport and reverse. However, the problem here is that there is no park mode like an AMT transmission. Now my worry with this comes with the fact that it's okay in cities where you have level ground, or at the most you have a slight ramp on a parking lot. It is fine for a new car. But say you're in a hilly region somewhere and you need to park on a very steep incline. So allowing the car to be solely rested on a handbrake that is connected to drum brakes at the rear is not enough. So you're going to have to go old school and find some bricks or rocks to, put underneath the tires so that the car doesn't roll away. This is in fact something that is very valid for a car once it gets older in its lifespan as well, because a cable operated handbrake connected to rear drum brakes is never the strongest setup. So over time when cars age, handbrakes tend to become less effective in these models, and sometimes they just don't have the potential to keep a car idle at an angle. Which is why this is something that really concerns me. But what is completely new here is the driver information display. So you get a traditional analog speedometer to the right side, and on the left side you get an all digital display that displays your battery level, how much battery you're consuming, your battery regeneration levels. The energy flow is also available on the display to show you when you're using power from battery pack, etc. Otherwise, everything is identical as a Nexon. So you get a very nice seating position here. You get height adjustable seat belts for front occupants. And like the traditional models, the thick A-pillars and the big ORVM do cause a bit of a blind spot, but this is a 5-star NCAP car. So all the thick beams there are there for your protection, of course. Now Tata insists that despite this being an electric car which has a lithium-ion battery pack sandwiched between this floor and the underneath of the car, they say that the Nexon in fact has not lost out on any leg room for rear seat passengers because of a higher boot floor. So now it's time to get into the rear seat and see for ourselves just what it's like over there. So yeah, we've stepped into the rear seat of the Nexon Electric now, and you know what? The Tata officials were right, because they have really pulled off a miracle with this one. as the floor isn't all that high. So unlike other electric cars such as the Hyundai Kona Electric and the MG ZS Electric, where the floor of the car is quite high, which is why you do not get enough under thigh support in those cars. But here in the Nexon, now this car has always been very spacious when it comes to the rear seat. And that is in fact what has helped this vehicle get away with that battery pack under the floor. Still, Tata officials are honest enough to say that the floor in fact isn't all that high because the battery pack kilowatt hour rating isn't as high as those two cars that I had mentioned earlier. And relatively, this floor has come up very little. However, because this floor is slightly higher than the conventional Nexon, I have enough space, I have enough under thigh support here, I have enough leg room as you can see. But what is happening is that my feet are now pointing upwards because it's only my heels that are in contact with the floor. So that is the only convenience factor which this car loses out in respect to the traditional Tata Nexon. Now in terms of equipment, this is the second to top XZ Plus variant of the Nexon Electric. There is a top-end Luxe variant which gives you some additional equipment such as faux leather upholstery for the seats, a sunroof, automatic headlamps, automatic wipers. All of that stuff isn't available in this XZ Plus variant. Having said that, I think it has everything that it needs. So the electric Tata Nexon, well, as expected, it feels very quiet from behind the wheel. NVH is very, very low. In fact, there's hardly any vibrations in here. And this does feel like a true blue electric car. Now, from the moment you set off, you can hear a little bit of that electric motor whine. I like that. You get a sense of what is going on, which is very nice because as humans, we are more analog than digital. So we need some sort of a feel, some sort of a tangible feeling when we are operating a motor vehicle. And this really helps make you feel right at home. So despite this being an all-electric car, you get a very good sense of its operation, and that's really helpful. Moving on, the car is powered by a 30.2 kilowatt hour lithium-ion polymer battery pack that is water-cooled and comes with an IP67 dust and moisture-proof rating. So this morning we've been driving it around a little bit in the city, as you can make out right now, and a little bit on the highway. And in the city, it feels very, very nice and quiet and refined to drive. There are two drive modes, there is drive and there is sport. So right now I'm in drive. So in this mode, it offers a very linear driving experience. It's very easy to navigate your way around. Throttle response is just as you'd expect it to be. And overall, it feels like a very nice city car. However, when you're trying to exploit those gaps in traffic, that's when you notice the lack of power because acceleration is extremely linear all the time. So if you want to be doing any overtaking, it's best you shift to sport mode. Now in sport mode, the Nexon Electric has a very sprightly response to throttle inputs. So acceleration is fairly quick and that helps while overtaking as well. Now this car has a rated power output of 129 PS and 245 Newton meters of peak torque. And in fact, this car can do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 9.9 seconds. So not bad at all there. But when it comes to out and out performance on highways, I'm afraid, when you're going really hard at the throttle, power tends to fade, especially after about 85-90 kilometers an hour. And as you approach 120 kilometers an hour, this powertrain is maxing out. Post 120, the response isn't adequate and it's best you stick below that. But I did notice something when you're going heavier on the throttle. So when it comes to aggressive throttle inputs, there's a slight judder that comes into play. And this is something that I have to mention because the harder, the more aggressive your throttle inputs are, the more prominent that judder becomes. So in sport mode, it is more prominent. So when you're driving around twisty mountain roads where there are all sorts of inclines and bankings, that's when you realize that, when you make a transition from traditional engine-powered car to a battery-powered car, the weight distribution has completely been changed. This car is claimed to have a 50-50 weight distribution over each axle. And while that is commendable, what I did notice is that the weight transfer around fast bends changes the inherent handling traits of this car. For when it comes to handling, the Nexon Electric does struggle at quicker speeds. Say there's an uphill right-hander with a banking. At this point, the left side front suspension is compressed, so the left wheel has enough traction, but the right wheel struggles for grip as it does not have enough force pushing it down into the road. This change in handling behavior comes from spring and damper rate revisions in the car's suspension setup, as well as an alteration of its torsional rigidity. And when both wheels are in contact on an uphill bend, the sudden power from the electric powertrain can cause a fair amount of understeer as the tires howl for grip even with part throttle inputs. Which is down to the fact that an electric motor can spin freely at any point of time and it delivers instant power, whereas an internal combustion engine, the camshaft has to move up and down, the pistons move up and down, the crankshaft moves round and round. So by the time all of this power comes to the axle via the transmission, there is that gap. Whereas in an electric car, it is instant power delivery, so which is why there is that wheel spin. But having said that, some more fine-tuning needs to go into the suspension setup of this car to make it fully compliant to an EV's powertrain when it comes to its dynamic handling capabilities. Nonetheless, my overall first impressions of the Nexon Electric are impressive. This is a great electric car that is perfectly suited to your urban driving needs. But that's not the end of this review just yet. For afterwards, we managed to head into Tata's test track for a couple of tests, and one of them was water wading. So with my fingers crossed, I ventured in to bust the myth about getting electrocuted while water wading in an electric car. So this being an electric car, some clever electronics too. Basically the engine management system, the ECM, will detect a gradient. We're going to climb a 7-degree gradient right now. So we've just come to Tata Motors test track in Pune, and ahead of us is a 7-degree gradient. Now this being an electric car, it has to have a clever brain. So the ECM will detect a gradient and it will provide power on its own, provided you don't put any throttle input. So let's try that. What I've been told is that I drive halfway up this incline and let off the throttle. The car will detect I'm at a gradient. It will not roll back. In fact, it will power me all the way across it. So let's try it. Drive, and easy as that, go. So now I'm using throttle and I am halfway up the gradient and I have let go completely. See, no legs and the car is just climbing on its own. In fact, once we go over the incline and hit the downhill gradient, the hill descent control will step in and it will limit speed to 18 kilometers an hour. So there again, no pedal driving. And my feet are completely off the pedals and we hit the downhill gradient. It accelerates and then it limits the speed. The power of electronics. Next is water wading, 300 millimeters of water. This car has a ground clearance of about 205 millimeters. When we drive through this, the battery pack is in fact going to be below the level of water. So let's hit it. Touching the underbody of the car, but there's no water coming in at all, and because there's no tailpipe, you do not have to worry about flooding the engine or anything. There's no intake either, so no worries there.